I wear my rubbers when it rains and eat an apple every day, then see the doctor anyway. What if I can't live to love you as long as I want to? Long as I promise you, baby, I'm gonna love you as long as I live. Live to love you as long as I want to. Life is long enough, baby, but I can love you as long as I live. Yeah, maybe I can't give you diamonds and things like I want to, but I can promise you, baby, I'm gonna want you as long as I live. I'll even wear long underwear when winter breezes blow. I'm gonna take good care of me, because a sneeze or two might mean the flu, and I would never, never do. What if I can't live to love you as long as I want to? Long as I promise you, baby, I'm gonna love you as long as I live.
Good evening, everybody. Welcome to Pangea. Welcome to our artist talk. Who's been to some of our other artist talks here? Woo, there's a couple of people in the back. Yes, of course, Wendell, you've been here. And of course, you've been here. You're a familiar face. So a little bit about the artwork on the wall that you're seeing here tonight. This show was curated by Angela Fremont, right over here, who everybody knows. A round of applause. And produced by Wendell Walker, right? This was his idea to do a collective show. And the theme was happening right around Mother's Day, right? Very poignant theme, our mothers. Mother's Day can be very hard for many people to deal with. So, my own opinion, what a great way to celebrate the mothers in our lives. I'd like to read you a little bit from Angela's statement, since she is the curator. The motivation for our mothers was very open. Who are our mothers? More than those who raised us, more than the DNA in our blood, more than the ache, regret, mystery, unanswered questions, lost moments, anger, and forgiveness. It's a lot of stuff. And then watching the war on Gaza, and the thousands of women and children that died and were maimed physically and psychologically, and from the suffering of women and children around the world in Sudan, Iran, Nigeria, Chad, Lebanon, DR, Ukraine, Syria, Afghanistan, and Mali, just to name a few, from lack of healthcare, fresh water, educational opportunities, and legal parity. So in response, at home, our mothers is a global and local statement of love, growth, loss, resilience, power, sorrow, transformation, grace, and gratitude, with so much more to say. On behalf of all the artists, it is with most humble appreciation to our mothers that we share our works with all of you at Pangea. Thank you. And thank you, Angela. Beautiful curator statement. And here we are today. Larry Dobens, I'm going to have you tell people a little bit about yourself, a brief little description.
Okay. Hi, everybody. Thanks for coming. I was born in New Hampshire, in a very small town, but it was rapidly growing at the time of my birth. Nashua, New Hampshire, southern New Hampshire. I loved art from, I think, from a very early age. I remember, sitting down before my nap and having to do a drawing with my mother, kind of like looking over my shoulder. And so I guess I never lost that love for art, and here I am.
And here you are, right? And here you are. Angela, what about you? A lot of people here know you, so they know your history. Ooh.
But there are a lot of people here that I don't know.
Okay,
so,
there, you have to tell them your history then.
So I'm from South Florida, and I grew up in a very rural environment, and my parents were both sort of artists. My father built boats, and my mom played classical piano. And I was left alone a lot. And in this environment, I just sort of explored and built tree houses. And certainly by the time I was 12, I knew I was an artist because my parents smoked cigarettes like everybody did in the 50s. And there was a, can I tell a little story?
You're free to tell as many stories as you want.
There were matchbook covers lying around, and there was a matchbook cover that had a profile of a drawn profile, and it said, if you can draw this, you can have a career as an artist.
I actually remember those. I'm so glad you told that story.
And inside was the address to send your drawing. And of course, I could draw this, and I filled in very meticulously inside my name, address, my age, 12 years old, and I sent it off to you-know-where, New York. And so I knew at a very young age where the artists were. And I sent it off to New York and never got a response. Maybe my mom got a response and said, what is this girl thinking? But I never got a response, but I knew where the artists were. So.
And now you're one of them. There you go. See, she's a visionary. So with this collection, Our Mothers, I mean, you curated it, you've got work in it, What kinds of things came up for you when you were working on this?
Well, first of all, I wanted a lot of diverse work. And so I invited a lot of different kinds of artists into the show. And I anticipated also, there were size limits. And working with Wendell, I think, was very helpful, because when you collaborate with someone who is a professional, who has done this kind of work before, who really knows exactly how to put together a show, and who is also working with a client who is Pangea. He knows how to, smooth the waters.
That's Wendell, a water smoother, right? Sails right through. But you brought up something about working with a curator like Wendell. You have to have trust. And there are artists I talk to that have been in shows, and I've been to shows, and I'm sure you have, where you say to yourself, not sure what the curator was thinking or how they put it together. This show flows.
Well, Wendell trusted me.
But you had also trust him, right?
I totally trust him.
Totally trust him. Yeah, trust is a mutual thing.
100%.
100%. So we had a lot of different kinds of artists, as you can see in this show, and we've been having these talks, and we have abstract interpretations of what a mother is, but we also have paintings here you can look at and drawings where you can understand the subject of mother. Do you want to talk a little bit about your two pieces, and then I'll move on to Larry?
Okay, sure. So, my pieces are very, very personal. They're about my mom and about my childhood. And my mom was a very super loving mother. She loved her daughters very much, but she was very isolated in South Florida. She was, as I wrote in the catalog. How many of you saw the catalog and had a chance to read? Okay, well, I'll just say, down our dirt road, our neighbors were dairy farmers and chicken farmers, and we lived on 5 acres, and she, my mother was raised in an orphanage, and she did not have a mother to talk to. She didn't have a father to talk to. She had no one to really support her as a young mother herself. She had my father's mother, who was not warm and not supportive, and she lived way up in North Miami, and we were way down in South Miami. So, and in where we were, there were rattlesnakes and coyotes and
Gators?
raccoons and no
gators.
No, because this was all farmland. So, but it was scary, and there were giant tarantulas, and she was alone because my dad was a traveling salesman, and when he wasn't building boats and writing and drinking, he was on the road. And when he was home, he was an abuser. And so she was really, really, really alone. And so that's what these pieces tell, that story.
Yeah, and I think they did a really beautiful job of saying that you can feel the loneliness in the pieces. I could when I looked at them. So, and I didn't know really that about your background. So, isn't it great that we can use art in such a way to convey, our emotions, our history? And yes, it's hard because it brings up things for you that maybe sometimes you don't want to call out or you don't want to remember. And I can hear from what you're saying, there was a lot of pain, but also the joy as an artist, being able to share this and create what we all have in this room here. Larry, what about you?
What was the question?
How did the art that you have on the walls here, how did it come about, and how did you relate it to the theme of our mothers?
I was gonna say, I trusted Angela too, definitely, for a long time. So when she invited me to the show, I knew immediately that I had some more for it.
I can't hear.
Is this on? Oh, okay. Sorry.
Okay, cool.
So I knew immediately what I was going to put into the show. The pieces that I'm referring to are at the very ends on this wall, the Boston bean pot, and the one that has the tablecloth. So these are items that I inherited from my mother after she passed, and so they embody for me the feeling of growing up and having beans every Saturday night. And like I said, we're in southern New Hampshire. We're about 15 minutes from Boston. So that's a Boston baked bean pot. And so I sort of cherished it because she would bring those firemen. My father was a fireman. And on Saturdays, she'd make bean. Maybe she had a couple of them, I don't know. But she'd bring the firemen a big pot of beans, and they all loved her for doing that. And so when I inherited this, and I painted both of these during the pandemic, and I sort of like went on a binge of doing domestic paintings because we were all stuck indoors.
Eating, we were all stuck indoors
Yeah.
eating.
I learned to bake, and I did a lot of baking of beans also in that time. So it just seemed like it was perfect to paint it because it symbolized my mother growing up, and it's so funny during the opening, a lot of people came up to me, not only that one, but the tablecloth also. So my mother had a tablecloth just like that. And so, it's sort of interesting that I touched a few nerves or, memories of the folks that were at the opening that night.
Yeah, and that's a very beautiful thing. And your experience, of course, was very positive. These are wonderful, warm, and positive memories for you. Yeah. So as you're both socially engaged, politically engaged people, how do you create artwork that is socially engaged? What is your thought process behind it?
You go first, Larry.
So let me clarify a little bit, something that will speak to people politically, because we can take what we're feeling, or rage about inequality, how can we make things better, and as artists you can take and put that into your work. So what is your process?
The funny thing is, I grew up in a very idyllic kind of setting, and politics was something furthest from my mind most of the time growing up. I didn't really become politically aware until I got to school, the University of New Hampshire. There were, sort of gay rights demonstrations that were just starting to, kind of bubble to the surface during that time. So I remember that, and sort of like being conflicted about that, being from a fairly conservative household, but on campus for the, kind of free for the first time in my life was really a revelation. A year and a half in New Hampshire, I came to New York because that's where the artists were. And I didn't know that though, really. I applied to a couple of schools and got into Parsons, and so I decided to come here. And I really didn't know what I was getting myself into. And I was sort of fearful, first year of my life. And my world was the campus, which was just building on Fifth Avenue, and Metropolitan Museum of Art. That's where I would spend my weekends, and going up there and visiting the museum, getting to know the collection was just a revelation for me in terms of art history. I was taking those classes at school, so being able to go to the world-class museum like that and every day in the short subway ride was just an amazing thing. I don't know if that answers your question.
No, but you've given us insight certainly as to what your early days were like here, and you're right. I feel that you did have an idyllic perception of New York and what it was like, which is interesting to me because what I know about your work, you do reflections.
Right. So my work is about, the current work that I'm doing is about New York, and sort of I guess very fascinated with New York right from the start. Like I described going to the Met, but the truth is I didn't dare walk about 14th Street, because that was too scary.
That was too dicey.
Yeah, that was too dicey. This is 1974, and things changed quite a bit since then. But I lived in the second year that I was here. I lived in an apartment that was between 2nd and 1st Avenue, and none of my friends would come visit. It was just too scary out there. And
This neighborhood was crazy in those days. It was very dangerous.
I've gone through a lot of love-hate with New York City. There have been times when I've loved going away, and I've had a couple of residencies, long-term residencies in places, and it was really nice to be in the country again, to revisit sort of my roots, New Hampshire, in nature. But I always came back, like New York was, I always came back, and now I'm painting basically reflections of the city. So they're upside down paintings in bodies of water, could be ponds or lakes or fountains or puddles even. So I'm still kind of fascinated with the structure. of New York, the structure, the infrastructure of New York. So the fact that they're upside down.
Yeah, I was gonna ask you,
Yeah.
like the perception of the reflection and
Yeah.
upside down. It's almost like seeing New York through rose-colored glasses.
Well, in a way, but I also see them as broken and fragmented.
Fragmented,
And
yeah.
that's kind of the world that we're living in right now. So I think that there is some politics involved in that, maybe if you want to, kind of extrapolate a little bit. But also maybe something about global warming, because some of these puddles are pretty, I haven't gotten to know them. Some of them just never go away no matter what, even during dry spells. And so there's, water has been something that I was involved with for many years before I started making reflections in New York City, about New York City. So I sort of discovered it during COVID also. So riding my bike, seeing a puddle in the evening, after teaching on, remotely all day, riding along the East River Drive, and seeing reflection of the city, of the sunset, and the city reflected all around me. Like I stopped and I was like breathless, and so I thought, I can paint this.
This is what I can paint,
This is what I can
right?
paint, right? So, 5 years later, I'm still doing it.
Right, but you brought up something about it being fragmented, right? And I think a lot of us right now, we're feeling fragmented. Out there feels extremely fragmented, uncertain. I know, Angela, you very much have connected in your work as a catalyst, the kidnapping of those Nigerian schoolgirls, which I actually lived in that area in Nigeria where all that happened, and it really flipped me out. What was your response in terms of the artwork you created to that?
So, for those of you that may not remember, in 2014, 276 school girls ages 11 to 15 were kidnapped in Chibok, Nigeria. And they were taken by the Boko Haram in northeastern Nigeria. And I am a public school art teacher, like Larry. And when that happened, a few days after it happened, because the Nigerian government did not respond to it when it happened. But a few days later, it appeared in the New York Times with a photograph of the girls seated with hijabs in a semicircle with an ISIS flag. And they were children. And it really struck me as a very, very personally and very emotionally. It felt like my students. It felt very personal. It felt very, very tangible. And I knew I would make art about it. I didn't know how or what it would be, but it ended up being a project that I am still working on today. I ended up making 276 sculptures, ceramic sculptures that are about
Incredible, right?
they're about 12 inches tall, and they are all numbered so that I could keep track of each one of them. Each one is unique, and they all have their arms raised up as survivors, not hunched over as victims,
right? Not victims.
as they were pictured in that photograph. And they're all wearing gilis, which is what they're called in Nigeria, which is a fabric head wrap. And they're looking up. And so this expression of could be one of pleading, of a lament, or it could be hopeful. It could be a gesture of gratitude. It could be a gesture of celebration. So as a viewer, you bring to it what you are experiencing in the moment. And the sale of the sculptures goes towards the foundations that I have partnered with in Nigeria, the Neem Foundation and the Murtala Muhammad Foundation. And the funding that they receive works with the survivors that have come back, and we know that there are still 93 girls that are
They're
unaccounted.
still out there and unaccounted for. I
That's
know.
11 years ago. And so I still work with that project, and there's a dedicated website that's called the Chibok Project if you want to, see that on your own. And
I brought that up because I really wanted Angela to share that. We can use our art to make political statements, right? And most people, and we all know a lot of very intelligent people here in New York, if you bring that up, they'll just say, oh yeah, it's not something that's with them. It lives inside of you.
it does. And every year I partner with a professor at Brooklyn College, and she is the organizer of Bring Back Our Girls here in New York City.
Girls, yeah.
Yeah, and there's a Zoom in Lagos and in Abuja, and we honor those families in Abuja. And
Thank you for using your artistic ability in that way. So both of you have come from the educational system as well, which I said to Wendell before this, I said, so many of the artists that have been in this show, they're articulate, it's not woo-woo. And I said, it's because they have the background of having to be teachers, right? And when I think of teachers, I think of sharing, educating, what is that? So how has teaching, Larry, affected your art?
I remember, working in my studio, and I'd be painting and, having the radio on or some music, and all of a sudden I'd stop and find a piece of paper and do a sketch or write notes for an art lesson.
I
That
love
somehow,
it.
that
A very
whole-
organic
Yeah,
action,
yeah,
right?
And through the process of making art, I came up with lessons for children of all ages, and I think Angela and I worked for Studio in a School, which is hired working artists, and when I first started teaching, basically I worked in an after-school program with very limited contact with children. But when I started Studio in a School, I was basically thrown into a situation where I had 5 classes a day for 4 days a week, and it was a duck.
Right.
How do you survive this? And it was through somehow, the creative process of working in my own studio and understanding my process and finally getting to know how to, communicate that. Studio in a School was a great organization. They demanded certain, process from the artists, including a demonstration. So it was like really introducing materials and meaning through art and process. And somehow the first 3 months were a struggle. And I remember my supervisor coming to visit Stacy, and she gave me a few pointers that were really just kind of general. And all of a sudden, it's like something clicked and fell into place. And after that, I was kind of off and running. And,
You were good.
Yeah.
After that.
And it was like the joy of bringing art to children. This is in the Bronx.
Absolutely.
Was just phenomenal.
Right.
Those years were quite wonderful. Not always, but for the most part, those early Studio in a School years were quite wonderful. We really learned our craft of how to be a teacher, and it fed back and forth into the studio. So.
Well, it fed the children and it fed you as well. Isn't that great? What about for you, Angela?
Larry, I just love how articulate
Yeah,
you
really.
are. You just expressed everything about how wonderful it is to be a teaching artist, because Toto, isn't that true?
It's
Yes.
so true. I'm
There's
just
another
nodding
studio.
along.
Oh, yeah, there's Toto, who was here last week.
And also
Same program.
Ellen Izzo is here, who is also a teaching artist. And when you're an artist and you teach, and Kathleen is also a playwright who teaches, when you share your craft, there's nothing like it. It's like it's just something.
You become a vessel, okay, to put it out there when you can do that.
And when you're with a 5-year-old and sitting on the floor, it's just perfect. There's 20 kids sitting around you, and they're glued to your hands. It's just like a magical moment, and every movement that you make is going into that little seed there, and it is growing, and they will never ever forget what you are giving them, ever. It takes away all the other
Garbage.
all
the
the other garbage,
yeah.
all that other painful stuff, because you are giving them that beautiful stuff that they then can use for themselves. Right, Sam? Yes, because Sam now is, he's now transformed into that next generation, right?
So Sam was one of your students?
No, but Sam is now a grown-up artist.
That's really great.
Sam is Larry's son.
And that's your son.
That's my son. And he also had a wonderful teacher that Angela and I know at the public school that he went to that gave him an amazing foundation.
Please say the public school. Yeah, which one was it?
The Earth School.
The Earth School's really great.
Yeah.
You know, we hear about all the cuts in the arts and education and everything. Is the studio school still around?
Studio School is still around.
Right
They
in there.
lost their figurehead
Aggie.
Hang it in there. Good.
Yes, created studio and school with Tom Cahill, and what a wonderful and generous woman she was. And here's to Aggie.
Yeah.
Bravo.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Here's to Aggie. So, you have your ups and downs, but both of your artistic backgrounds are way more smooth sailing than a lot of the people that I have met and that are not even here anymore, that came to New York in the late 70s when I did, that they were just going to, quote unquote, do their art. And I was saying to Wendell before the show, maybe it's because, you both had higher education, right? You both went to the schools that you went to, and I think that kind of path is way different than leaving your little hometown with a talent, but nothing behind you, and you're going to come to the Lower East Side and be an artist, right?
Wendy, when I came to New York, I was 19. I didn't come here to go to art school.
You did not.
No, I did not. I came here in a green Volkswagen with a hammock and
It
a
was a
sleeping
Volkswagen
bag.
Bug, right? You came here in
Yeah.
a Volkswagen Bug.
Yeah. And my bug didn't have a gas meter.
No.
When you ran out of gas, you just turned the valve. And I got a job, and I worked for 3 years for NYU. And after 3 years, I thought, maybe I should go to school.
Yeah.
And so I applied to nursing school, and I applied to art school, because I had been taking these painting classes at School of Continuing Ed at NYU because it was free, because
Right, 'cause those
I
were
worked
free
at
then.
NYU. And I was a very, very, very bad painter. I mean, the worst. And I got into both nursing school and art school. And I asked my painting instructor,
What should I choose?
which should I choose?
That's a stacked deck. You know that.
Yes. And he was a pretty famous second generation abstract expressionist. His name was George Dworzen. And bless his heart, he said, Angela, I cannot tell you what to do, but I can tell you this. If you choose the thing you think you should do instead of the thing you think you
Can do.
want to do,
Can want.
and it doesn't work out, you will lose out two ways. Because it didn't work out for you, and you didn't even have the satisfaction of doing what you wanted to do.
Wow. Wow.
What very good advice, because in that critical moment, I knew what I wanted to do.
Yeah.
Did I want to be
A nurse?
No. Hell no. Hell no.
You did not. And
did
that
not.
mentor was really, really important. He gave you valuable words that you're still carrying with you, right?
It's probably never a straight path to, becoming an artist. For me, it's a similar, funny thing, but when I went to the University of New Hampshire, I was studying, the major was medical technology. Basically, I love being in the lab. I like the atmosphere, and I like doing experiments, doing the, tests and measuring. And so I thought, this would be an interesting career.
Yeah.
And so I was, because I liked drawing, I still loved drawing, I took drawing classes there, but I was studying kind of a pre-med course. And eventually, after a year, and I spent a year and a half at the university, I was spending more time in the studio than I was in the lab.
Larry, I'm sorry, either you need to
I'm
hold
sorry.
it closer or they need to adjust your mic.
Okay, I'll try.
Try holding it closer, because I can hear you fine here, but thank you,
Thank
Suki.
you.
Okay, how is that now?
Yeah.
Testing? Go ahead.
Yeah, is that better?
Good.
Yeah. Okay, I forgot that I'm speaking to an audience.
Sorry for the interruption.
That's okay.
So I was spending more time in the studio than in the lab, and it kind of like was a wake-up call. You kind of like say, in a way, like, what do I want to do? I want to do what my parents think I should do, or what they want to do.
right.
Very
similar.
So it's a tough decision, and so I struck out. After the first semester of my second year there, in the middle of the year, it was holiday break. I arrived in New York City, and it was an empty dorm room because my flatmates were on vacation, and I was so excited to be there, scared at the same time. I met a bunch of people, and it was really hard to get to know them at first, but then sort of like the facade fell away, and all of them admitted to each other. We all admitted to each other that we felt the same way.
Yeah,
We were
scared. Yeah.
and we were desperate to connect in a way. And once that happened, the years at Parsons were good. It was a very different experience than being in the art department or taking drawing classes at a university, especially the University of New Hampshire was fairly conservative, but I got a good foundation there for drawing.
Sure.
And when I came to New York, it was much more like, the atmosphere was sort of experimental, abstract expressionism was just kind of like fading, conceptual art was in the air, and you could have the gallery system. That we were given assignments, go see this show, go see that show.
Yeah, it's all here.
So introduced to so many different kinds of artists and ways of working, and it was just a wonderful education. And eventually I was glad that I made that change in New York. Right.
And a lot of the artwork you're creating is about New York,
It's
so
about New York,
there
yeah.
you go. It's
I haven't gotten over the fact that I'm here.
me neither.
Makes three of us.
Right. So in terms of the current art scene, I love asking this. Like, what are your feelings about how things work now? You've done your time in New York. You're still doing it. where are you at? What do you feel about art and how it's being shown and lived in New York?
Well, I love that we have this show at Pangea.
Me too.
And,
Right, thank you.
And I've always loved alternative spaces. And I think, you know, back in the 80s and 90s, there were so many alternative spaces. And I think that young folks that put together Spring Break and all these shows, they understand how important alternative spaces are. I think the problem with the gallery system is that they need to make money, right? And that artists make art because we need to make art.
Yeah.
And I was just saying this to Harold, you know, I just need to do this. I gotta stop worrying about the other stuff. I just need to make my work and just do the work.
Really good point. That is an absolute quote. And I see people shaking their heads. And it's hard in New York because you're constantly, especially if you go to the shows and the people that go to the shows, and you're constantly being shown things that are very different maybe from your work. And then you get into the whole head, maybe, you know, I should be going in a different direction. What do I need? You know, what do I need to do? How do I continue to create my art and do my thing without letting all the outside stuff here get inside? What's it like for you? What do you tell yourself now, Larry?
Well, you know, I still see a lot of shows, not as much as I want to or should probably, but it's a really fertile time, I think, in New York City.
Fertile
There's
time, yeah.
a lot of great art being made. It's so interesting that I was going over the list in my head and they were all women. There were so many amazing women artists right now. I think that is kind of, and it's been building, I think, for a while. I was just going over it, like, you know, Kathleen Bradford and Lisa Yuskevich, who just had a show that was amazing. And so, you know, that is a lot of, you know, fertile ground for me, seeing shows. And I, like you said, I've never really made art to sell or make money. That wasn't the motive behind it. It wasn't the motivation. I just love making art. And even while I worked full time after I left the studio and school, I joined the Department of Education in New York City. So I went from 5 classes a day, 4 days a week, to 5 classes a day, 5
days a week.
But I was prepared for it because of studio and school. And weekends were, you know, I mean, there was a you know, time for myself, but also it was time to be in the studio. I would, even if I was too exhausted to paint, I would go sit in my studio and stand or sit for a while looking at the work, maybe get up and do some work, and just like for a half an hour, and just go, okay, I'm really too tired now to continue. But it was that connection that was never lost, even though I worked full time, and you know, the idea of a weekend artist was something that I wasn't going to do.
No way.
So I retired 3 years ago, and I'm full time now. And I started applying for shows because I had that extra time, and it's been fun. You know, I've had more shows in the last 3 years than I had the previous 20 years. So it's mostly group shows like this, and so you know, I have a very good friend who says never say no, and so that's my philosophy. So when Angela asked me to be here in the show, I jumped at the opportunity. It's just a really wonderful group of artists that I'm so glad to be part of.
Yeah, well, now you can jump at the opportunities. You know, really, I think it's hard and challenging when you have a full-time job, but both of you were in the arts, you know, teaching. That's a really great thing to be able to do. And, you know, now the sky is the limit. So, Angela, what's the plan going forward?
Well, I've applied for a few residencies, so we'll see what happens with those. And I am looking for studio space in the city because I want to be working more here, where I can build, more of a community here in the city.
And have the support of other artists. It's certainly out there for
Yeah.
you. And what about you? What's coming up for you?
Well, the summer.
Larry just wants to be free. He's going to lay out in the sun and
Well,
plan a painting.
the scene kind of winds down a little bit. Galleries pretty much go on vacation, close for August, so things heat up again in September. So I'll continue to just apply for shows, mostly open calls for art, and see what happens. And right now, it seems like a good thing to be doing, and just getting work out there to be seen in various places. And if anything happens, great. I'm applying for a few residencies too. I work.
Well, maybe you'll both get to be at the same residency. Does that ever happen?
Well,
Let's talk.
Isn't that great?
yeah, and I did some earlier on in my career during the time where I was sort of kind of homeless and didn't really have a job that was stable job, like working for studio school or DOE. So I did residencies, and they're a good way to escape reality, of the situation. So they're really great, but I think I would approach it in a very different way now, having so many years behind or in between. So I would really use I use the time wisely while I was there at various residencies, but so I'll definitely go for a few more. In fact, I just applied one to go work at the Grand Canyon. So.
That sounds like a great way to spend the rest of the summer.
Yes.
My God. Of the works that both of you have done, is there anything that really stands out that you are most proud of, that you think affected things out there?
Of my
Yeah,
work
something that you created that really made a statement.
Well, I mean, I love this show.
Yeah, and you love that it was about mothers.
I do. I think, yeah, and I did a catalog for it, and I loved collaborating with Wendell, and I loved bringing all the artists together, and I loved building the community of artists and audience around the artist conversations and meeting you with.
Yeah. Oh, thank you. Well, I feel the same. This has been, for me, extremely enlightening. I have to share a story, though, with Angela, and I do want to share it with our audience. Angela helped create materials for the arts.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and okay, so that's a New York City program that redistributes reusable materials from businesses to artists and schools and nonprofits. Okay, it's become a model for initiatives in other cities. So that's a huge thing, and it hit close home to me because my late husband did those pastels that are out in the hallway, Alan Kaplan, and I was left with thousands of pastel crayons when he died, literally tons of art supplies. And I got in touch with a friend that lives down in Westbeth, that it's an artist building. And I said, what can you do with this? I want to help. He said, we have lots of people here that really can use this stuff. So I started making little packages, and I had a lot of wonderful women come up to my apartment, and I'd hand them a little package. And that made me really feel good. And I actually did call Materials for the Arts. I couldn't get out there. They needed me to bring the stuff to Long Island City. I had no idea that was you. And when I found out about it, I'm like, that is so incredible that such a thing exists.
Yeah. I after I graduated from NYU, my first job out of NYU was in the Department of Cultural Affairs, and
Amazing story.
I just I just got lucky, and I just had this idea to start getting donations. And my boss was
Yeah. Yes.
I'd like to add something to that. I've been with a group called Gays Against Guns it's their 10th anniversary, and I've been with them for probably 8.5, 9 years. And one of the things that is a calling card of Gays Against Guns is what we call human beings, where people dress all in white with a hat and a veil, and we hold a placard of someone who was killed by gun violence. And the organization started when the Orlando massacre
Reaction to Pulse.
And because it was Pulse and because it's Gays Against Guns, we all decided that for our 10th anniversary, and we were grand marshals for the parade, we needed to zhuzh up our whites because these were people in a disco. They were not, modest and we went out with Sheen Dazzle and Sylvan Robinson to Materials for the Arts. And I went out a day before and we pulled all the supplies and this and that and the other, and about 20 of us went out there with blue guns and everything and zhuzhed up our HB costumes, which were shown at the parade. Having that venue and those workrooms was just incredible. And I'm just amazed and delighted to meet one of the founders.
Isn't that amazing, right?
The founder.
That's why we do these talks. So I'd like to start to take some questions from the audience. And Libby, thank you so much for sharing that with us. It's a great story. And I remember when you did it, but I never connected it to Angela until I started reading about you, and I'm like, holy moly. So,
Thank you, Wendy.
Oh, you're more than welcome. So I'd like to take some questions. What's burning inside of anybody that they want to share here? Oh. That you would like to know about the artist. Wendell, would you like to make a commentary?
Well, my usual question about the exhibition, Angela, it's an awkward question for you.
Yeah, it's okay.
Just what your thoughts are about your work is in the exhibition this year, and I just wondered what each of you think about the other work. If is there another favorite of yours in the show, and what you think about how your work in this context. I guess it's maybe a little more for you than Angela,
Yeah.
but
Sure, I'll go first.
Yeah, you go first.
Well, like I said, when Angela invited me to the show, I immediately, went to my file drawer and opened it up and rummaged through and found the drawings that I wanted to put on the shelf that stacked small paintings. So I knew exactly what I wanted to put in the show. And I wrote the blurb and sent it to her, and everything was fine. Now, when I came to the opening, I have to admit, I was a little bit, I loved the work, and I was a little bit like, geez, I just painted an object. Everybody else did these really conceptual works on maps and collages and holographs, and I was like, Jesus, I really suck, And that's so typical of me. That's what I usually do. But I kind of get over it and think, okay, my work stands up. But that's just my own sort of reveal here, my own security. I had a brother that bullied me my entire life.
There you go. It's that bully brother. It comes out here.
But so it's just a pleasure to be in this show. And for that period of time when I was working on those paintings, I just was enjoying. So, sometimes when you leave something behind, sometimes it all comes roaring back when it needs to. So I have a feeling that, domestic paintings, although I may never do them quite like this again, that somewhere it's going to enter my work again. I painted factories spewing smoke and pollution for years and years and years, and I'm sort of thinking of ways of kind of incorporating this stuff into reflections, So this work is inspiring to me because it opens up so many, there were so many interpretations of our mothers. I mean, I did my mother, and I thought, okay, well, everybody else did mother, and but there are so many ways to see it,
Yeah.
and so I was inspired to, look and learn, and I think that artists are always doing that kind of thing and trying and experimenting and moving in certain directions, maybe pulling back and going in a different direction. So, this show has a lot of possibilities.
Yeah, I agree. For you, Angela, because you put this all together. What were you surprised by? I was very surprised when I walked into this room before we even had the opening, because I couldn't make the opening, because I was like, oh, I just expected, I don't know, portraits of people's mothers. I never expected, over there, we interviewed that artist last week. She does organic things that are in people's bodies. And then I look at it, and now I can see a mother in the middle of it. It really does affect your perception when you're in a collective show like this, and you see there's so many ways of looking at something, right?
Yes.
Yeah. Well, I think also with in one way, the topic of our mothers seems so straightforward. Like, I guess that's what you're suggesting.
Yeah, for me it was like, right.
What the various artists did, what Angela did in curating this,
Yeah.
takes it in many different directions. But Angela, maybe it's an unfair question for you.
Wendell,
But seeing it now on the wall,
I think,
3 months later.
Wendell, that working with looking at the work together with you, and the way the work is hung, and the way the work speaks to each other, the color and the patterns, the way the artists have taken the topic of of a mother as a personal experience, and I'm thinking about me and Toto, how personal, very, very intimate it is for us, and Larry, and how very political it is for Ellen, and the poem that Basie wrote for us. He wrote this poem, and it's so powerful to be able to invite the creative minds of really the most talented artists that I know, working right now, my colleagues, my peers, and say, bring it on, baby.
Yeah.
And they generously share their most intimate and personal, and their the stuff that they have got. What Sana told us about her mom, what she shared with us, she doesn't share that often. She doesn't. She gave that up, right? And
Each and every artist having work on this wall had to give something up.
absolutely.
It's a very vulnerable thing when you do this.
And that's right. And Olivia and also the painting that Stephanie made. I was not a good daughter, crossed out, but I am. I was not, but I am a good daughter. I am a good daughter, because in the end we are good daughters, just by virtue of being. So anyway.
Yes.
I'm raising my hand like I'm in school.
We have educators
It's just
here.
as you guys are talking, it's like, well, this is the ultimate classroom.
Yes.
These are all students.
That is a wonderful way to put it.
And another thing that I was thinking as you were speaking was, you know, you don't want to be the weekend artist, the weekend warrior, or any of that, and to keep your foot in the door. I constantly told myself when I was going through that, when working full-time, it was the 5-day, like, yeah, same thing. They have 45 minutes to make something in school. I'll take 45 minutes. Let me see what I can do in 45 minutes, and then I can go home. So just keep it. It's just important, I think, just to keep something going. It could be a scribble, it could be anything. But I found that was good to hear.
Yes. Yes, so good, Ellen. 45 minutes.
Yeah, that's what they got.
That's what
Well,
they got.
not even, because then, you know, you got to set up and clean up.
Right.
It was more like 30.
Yeah.
They were on the clock, as we say.
But if you got your own space, you have to clean it up.
Any questions? Yes, Suki, go ahead. I know you have a question in there.
I'm an artist,
Yes.
painter, and a teacher, an art teacher for children. I teach wealthy children for free. I take troubled children. I live when I'm not in New York, in a condo community in Connecticut. And I take troubled children between the ages of 7 and 12, and I give them as much time as they need. And I don't ask for any money from their parents. And they talk to me, and they paint, and they've never had anything for free in their lives.
That's interesting.
And I work with them, and they've had a hard time with the teachers in school because they're demanding or because they have hard times with their families at home. And they can't believe that they're getting anything for nothing. And I interview them before I teach them. They have to be really interested in art.
Yeah.
And otherwise I'm babysitting, and I don't babysit. And I've had an amazing time over the last 5 years with these children who I end up adoring. And that's just what I do. But this room is filled with such warmth.
Yeah.
This is the first time I'm seeing the paintings and the artwork, not all paintings. And to Wendell and Angela, and to the artists, it's such a beautiful selection of work. And I almost feel like crying. I haven't had that much time, but as you were speaking, I took some time to look, and I'm just so impressed and moved by the work. And I don't think that you have to represent your mother and your relationship by doing a portrait. And I do most of the portraits. It's just magnificent. And I also wanted to thank you, Angela, for mentioning all of the different calamities that are happening in the world with different people who are starving or in war or hurting. Thank you for that. It's not just Gaza. And I'm Jewish, and there is so much going on in the world, and we're all hurting.
Yeah.
And I'm just so glad I came tonight.
I'm so glad you came too. I'm like, Suki's here, she's an artist, yes. Any other questions from anybody in the audience?
I have a statement
Yes.
about artist educators. I was a museum educator at the Brooklyn Museum, and I taught in their artifacts program. And one day, a group of kind of rowdy teenagers came in to my class where I was teaching art. I was trying to talk to them, and they're not listening. And I went up to the board, still trying to talk to them, and drew a circle on the board. After that, my colleague who was in that class said, "Did you get that? Did you catch that?" "What?" "When you drew that circle, half of the class drew in their breath." I had drawn the circle through muscle memory. Made a perfect circle, it connected. What I'd given them is the essence of what artists can do and show. The kind of ability we have to do things without even thinking sometimes, by instinct. And that was a challenge. And he said, you may have done more than you think you've done in creating new artists.
Wow, Leah, that's quite a story. Any other questions from anybody?
This isn't a question, but
Comments?
and you know, and encouraging people, it's young people to go into the arts. I have a lot, and I don't mean to make this about me, but it's more about the way maybe art education's changed or something. But what I remember is in kindergarten, we used to get these big manila pieces of paper, and you were taught to do. The house was a cube with a triangle, and the sun was a circle, and the tree, I don't even remember. But I do remember sitting there one day, having done my little house, and left-handed, you were always, you know, turned upside down, so you met the angle of the cursive or whatever. And I remember sitting there going, with my paper here going like this, to do my blue sky, and the teacher walked over and she said, Libby, no, the sky doesn't go that way. It goes this way.
But
my earliest memories.
I know, but listen, Larry you paint reflections. So in your world, actually, the sky could go any which way you want it.
Right.
So she was wrong.
Exactly.
Exactly.
And it probably affected my films. You know, I don't remember. I was a snarky kid, so maybe. But of all the memories in my life, that one is emblazoned in my mind. The sky does not go this way.
Well, you have spent the rest of your life proving her wrong, so there you go.
Yeah, seriously, years.
I have an early.
Yes, please share.
One of my earliest memories of how I became an artist, or why I love art, I think, before I even realized what it was. I remember being carried on my father's shoulder to the Museum of Fine Art in Boston. And there's a gallery where there's a rotunda connecting two buildings, and there's a bunch of president portraits there. Famous Stuart of George Washington, whatever. But anyways, we ended up in a gallery, and I think I was put down on the floor and walking around, and I remember just staring at a painting, and I was like mesmerized by it, not knowing what I was really looking at. And I don't know how long this went on, but I just remember feeling warmth and the shapes and the way it just resonated on the wall. And all of a sudden, I was jerked violently away from it by my mother. Speaking of mothers.
Wow, lots coming out tonight here.
As I was walking out, or as I was pulled out, I kind of took a glance like this, and it was a nude.
So, she looked at that.
Yeah, it was a Matisse painting. I don't know if you know
A
this
Matisse.
painting, but it's called Carmelina. And it's just a beautiful ochre,
Matisse.
browns, and it was one of his early works. And I didn't even know it was a naked woman until my mother showed me that. But I never forgot that, and it became an aesthetic experience. And I ended up teaching, how to teach art to children with a bunch of adults, and in school, in college. And one of the first things I asked them, do you remember your first artistic experience?
Yeah.
And it was amazing how many interesting responses I got from it, how evocative it was. And I'll never forget that moment anyways. But so it was just, she kind of like woke up a lot of things by pulling me away, and I recognized that I was seeing painting in two different ways. I was seeing it as an experience, and at the same time I saw it as this other portrait of a woman sitting there. And it was only years later that I actually remembered that,
for you,
and remembered what painting it was. So, wow.
Larry, I have to tell you, in South Florida, there are no museums. There are now,
Yeah.
but in the 50s, baby,
There
Yeah.
were.
there's nothing. There's
Yeah.
nothing. And
One museum experience.
so I grew up looking at my mother's paintings and at a reproduction hanging at the foot of my bed. And I just want to tell you about those two things that I looked at. The reproduction was of a Gainsborough that she had bought at the grocery store.
I love it. Where else would you get it, right?
Yes, and it was framed hanging at the foot of my bed. It was Blue Boy, of course.
How incredible.
And I stared and stared and stared at that blue satin. And of course, there's nothing in South Florida like that. South Florida is sweaty and it's got stickers and you walk around barefoot. Nobody wears blue satin. Ever. And those blonde curls, that's in somebody's fantasy. So that became my fantasy of what? I can't even imagine where Blue Boy would exist.
Did Blue Boy come up for you throughout when you had memories about this? Because it's coming up now.
Just in as a dream of an aesthetic experience.
Yeah.
And then my mother, who did easel paintings, all of which I thought were originals, she would frame and hang on the wall. And so I finally had a museum experience at 19 when I walked into the National Gallery and saw my mother's painting. Of lovely women dropping their sarongs, falling into Tahitian waters.
Amazing.
And I sat suddenly on the marble steps thinking, why is my mother's painting? And I was truly shocked and could not understand until I looked on the wall and saw a foreign name that I couldn't pronounce, of course.
That you had never heard of before.
That I've never
heard of before.
But it was such a faithful rendering of the three Tahitian girls, in the sarongs, painted by Paul Gauguin. So, who's to say that, postcards aren't the most wonderful thing that you can send to someone?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, that was quite a story. on that note, thank you all for coming. We're going to have another show here. When is our next show, Wendell?
We'll be opening early September.
Early September.
Yeah.
So
Exact date TBD.
TBD.
So make sure you check in Pangea's event calendar, which has got great things on it. But we'll have another art show here in early September. So please come back and join us. I hope to do more artist talks. For me, going to galleries, going to collective shows, Libby, your friend's show, Alan's show, that art collective show, what frustrated me that night was all those artists were there that had one or two pieces on the wall. I knew nothing about them. And there were all these people that just came to have wine and they were talking to their friends. And there was tons of artwork all around and I knew nothing about those artists. There were a couple that I personally knew and I thought, wow, there has to be a better way to get this out there, right? Artists deserve more. They need to have their story told and not just in their work, okay? I think I'm a storyteller and I love telling people's stories, so I can't wait for the next one.
And you're so, so good at it.
Oh, thank you. Thank you, everybody.
I want to say a big thank you to Stephen and Arnaldo
Absolutely.
and Pangea. And a big thank you to Wendell because I couldn't have done this without you.
Stand up. I can't make them stand up. Stand up.
And also, we should mention also that the previous artist talks are all on YouTube. If you
Yes.
Google Pangea Artist Talks, you'll find them. And this will be up soon.
Thank you.
Thank you.